There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hey lovely people, see this backdrop? This is where I filmed my first alfresco Friday reads. I thought the traffic noise was not going to be a problem, and now that I'm home, it's louder than I thought when I tested it out outside. My voice is very clear even when the traffic noise is at its loudest, but the traffic noise kind of comes and goes. I will never film here again, I promise. I don't have the energy to redo this Friday reads. I hope it won't be too much of a problem for you. I won't do it again! Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with an outdoor Friday reads, the first one of the year. And I've found a shady spot near my house that I've never filmed in because I always thought the traffic noise would be too much, and you can tell me, but I am using my new iPad with no lapel mic. Maybe next week I'll try that. For comparison, I tested them both out and this is boring. So it doesn't seem to, the traffic noise doesn't seem to be horrible. So it's a really great mic. But there'll be a little bit of noise, so please bear with me. This is the only shady spot I could find near my house. It's been 2 weeks, I'm dying to talk to you. I have so much to tell you. And things are going really well in terms of getting ready for the move. So if you didn't see my announcement video about 10 days ago, I think it was, I'm moving to Canada at the end of May. Kenji is coming, but not that soon. And that was a bit of a emotional dipsy-doo when it looked like for a while that he wasn't sure emotionally whether he was going to be able to come. But that seems to be resolved, and we have our own plans. My flight is booked for May 28th and him October or something. I'm not going to regurgitate everything that I said. And of course I'm sitting here in a public walkway and I'm getting lots of strange looks from Japanese people, but you know, after 13 years in this country, I expect it, whether I'm making a video or not. What I didn't go into, and I'll go into in a little bit of detail now, let me get my coffee going here. A can of hot coffee from the vending machine. It's a beautiful day, by the way, about plus 15 maybe right now. It's about 11:30 in the morning. I think I'm actually gonna take my coat off and then I'm gonna get the stairs. Everybody else is still wearing their winter coats because, you know, the Japanese, not to make a too crude of a stereotype, but the Japanese decide their outdoor apparel and outdoor activities based on the date, not the weather, based on the climate rather than the weather report. So yeah, everybody that I can see is wearing it. Maybe a light winter coat, but whereas I am, this is shirt weather for me. Anyway, about the books, I booked movers early this year, and I told them from the very first email that I was 99% of what I was taking, or maybe 90% of what I was taking was books. And then I counted the books, or did a reasonable estimate, and I was planning at that time to move about 1,400 books. And then based on the volume, it's all done by volume, and this was the slow boat rate. It would take months and months for it to arrive, 3 months minimum, probably more like 6. And they gave me a quote. And this was always the deal between my parents and I, that they said, please come, please move back, we will pay for you to move your library back. And it wasn't cheap. And then they, I would say, put a fair amount of pressure on me to sign the contract. The moving company did, so I signed it. Mom and Dad put a deposit on their credit card for half. And then within a week, when I mentioned something else in another email, I haven't met these people, it's all been by email, and it's a Japanese staff person who I've been dealing with, writing in English. And when I mentioned something after that about my books, she said, oh, I kind of forgot you were bringing so many books. Actually, that might be a problem. I'll have to check and get back to you. It's a problem. I said, well, okay, please get back to me. But I said from the very first email, all I was bringing was books, pretty much. So she checked with Japanese customs, and the rule, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, and I know all of you will agree with me because you're here because you like books. In terms of shipping my belongings, I am only allowed to bring books that comprise a maximum of 30% of the overall volume of what I'm shipping. Otherwise, Japan will not let more books than that, out of the country. So I was furious because with the moving company, I said, I've been telling you from the very first email, and now you're telling me this after we signed the contract, and the cancellation policy was 20% cancellation fee. I said, well, I have to cancel this order. There's no goddamn way I'm giving you 20% of this when you misled me or whatever. So it was a very angry time because, I don't have 70% of a load in order to take 1,400 books. So it would have to be enough volume for that. It would be impossible, even if I took all my sex toys. So I was livid. So that's when this conversation with Kenji happened, because he was busy with work and he was not home when all this was happening. He was at his parents' house or at work and didn't get a chance to tell him any of it for a few days. And that's when he said, well, I know I'll ship most of my stuff with yours, and that'll allow you to take more books. And that will allow me to take a few more books. That's great. But it was mainly the emotional part of that he would be willing to ship most of his worldly possessions to Canada 4 or 5 months before he would ever be showing up. It gave me exactly the kind of security that I needed, and I've been fine about that ever since. And it will allow me to take a few more books. But so that's that backstory. Isn't that maddening? They're my books. What the hell? They said if you're a professor, maybe they'll allow it. Well, I'm a teacher, but I'm not a professor. The books are, in fact, 97% my personal books, not professional. But made nicey nice with the movers. They apologized and they said if you want to cancel, there'll be no cancellation fees. But decided to go with them, and this is the new plan B. And so then what I've been doing, I started this about 10 days ago, is I've been mailing a small box of books to myself or to my parents in Saskatchewan every day. Japan still has sea mail, so I can ship books around the world by a slow boat for really cheap. Like a box would hold 4 or 5 books, or 2 or 3 books if they were oversized hardcovers, but around that ballpark, 2 kilo box, anywhere in the world for about 10 or 11 bucks, which is really cheap. It takes 2 to 3 months to arrive, but who cares? So I've been shipping those to myself. And for some reason, Canada, that cheap rate is only available up to a maximum of 2 kilos, or I would be shipping 3 or 4 or 5 kilogram boxes, which I can to the States or other places and still get that cheap rate. But for some reason, Canada, since COVID started, I don't know whether it was Canada or Japan, probably Japan, imposed a 2 kilo limit for that cheap rate. So if I mail a box to Canada now that's 2.1 kilos or 3 kilos, cheapest rate is the express airmail, $100 a box. So compared to $11 a box. So I'm mailing very small boxes to myself every day, and then we'll see how much goes in the move. The movers are picking up on May 1st, and whatever's left, if I have to make 2 trips a day to the post office, I will do it to get my library shipped. Oh, and the other important part that I haven't mentioned yet is I'm going to offload 40 to 50% of my library, and I'm being quite ruthless. I have started filming book on-haul videos, so you'll see what I've gotten rid of. I'm offering them to a select group of friends if they're willing to pay for the shipping, and otherwise going to get rid of them. Books that are easily replaceable, books that I didn't really like, books that I really rather doubt that I will ever read or read in the next 5 years, they're all going. So I hope to whittle it down, and then with all these 2 ways of moving them, get the important part of my library to Canada by slow boat. The last thing about this rather long saga of how to move books from Japan to another country is, or what to do with the ones you're not going to move, is Lindsay told me about a book buying service that's very convenient. It's all in Japanese language, so I need her help to get me set up on the system. But once you're set up, you can just place an order for pickup and then have your books boxed. They will take them, this Tokyo book buying service, whatever the hell it is, and they will pay you by direct deposit into your bank account here in Japan, the ones that they think they can resell, and the other ones they'll either donate to charities or pulp for recycling. And she has used them for English language books over the last couple of years and said they pay better than most used bookstores in Japan, and they pick them up and they will get rid of the ones they don't want for me. So that's the last step of my book culling process, and I think this weekend or maybe next weekend, Lindsay will help get me set up on that, and that's going to be a godsend because I'm not lugging books around to used bookstores myself. So there you go. That's the state of affairs vis-a-vis my library here in Tokyo and how much of it I can get to Japan and what I'm doing with the rest. There is the update. Spring has sprung. There's a few hot men walking or bicycling by. Excuse me if my eyes wander. I think that's all I have for personal news. I'm not going to talk about Ukraine, but it's all consuming for me. And the last time I checked, nobody had assassinated Putin, and I'm available for the job. Book-wise, I have a lot to tell you. Oh, and by the way, now this is my first Alfresco Friday read since I got the new iPad. So this is my old iPad, which works quite well. I had been using a much older, the iPad before this, where the battery was pretty much dead, and this one is going to be very reliable over the long term. I have one bail to tell you about. A little sad about this one, but I'm glad that I decided to bail. That's the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée, Fanonne, Jeffers. After 150 pages, I bailed because I just wasn't connecting with the modern storyline. The way back in history, pre-Civil War slavery, the pre-Civil War storyline, I was really engaged by, but it's been about 50 pages and she hasn't brought it back. So, cute little kids, quite entranced with what I'm doing. If the novel was only that, I think I would be really enjoying it, but I just wasn't engaged by the modern storyline. Enough said. And the fact that I was reading this alongside the short story collection by Danielle Evans, which was so engaging on similar setting, similar characters, black women in America in the fairly modern times, and it was so gripping. And this was the exact opposite. I think if I hadn't been reading that alongside, I might have continued with this, but nope, this was a bail. It's too much of a commitment for how little I was enjoying it, so bye! And I have finished 4 books. The first one I finished was the poetry by the deaf Ukrainian-American poet, Ilya Kaminsky, Deaf Republic. And I don't know how to talk about poetry, but this, in a way, it read, one of my commenters also said this, it read like a novella or something. I mean, it was a story told in the form of poetry. And it was just heart-achingly beautiful. I loved it so much. I don't know if I have anything more to say than that. It was just really powerful, the personal and the political. It reminded me of one of my very most favorite novels, A Constellation of Vital Phenomena by that guy. There's the cover gif, blanking on his name, which is embarrassing when it's one of my favorite, well, I've got my iPad here, Sean. Anthony Marra. I didn't have to look it up. Anthony Marra. A lot of the emotional intensity of these poems sent me back into the heart of that novel, which is if you're looking for a novel to read to understand how evil Russia is and how to get a really character-based understanding of the impact of war on a group of people, A Constellation of Vital Phenomena is one of your very best recommendations I can give. It's not set in Ukraine, it's set in Chechnya. This collection of poetry, which is really, like I say, a novel or if you think you don't like poetry, you could just read it and ignore the line breaks, but it's deeper than the typical fictional narrative. I thought it was just beautiful. I read some poems in my last Friday reads or whatever day of the week reads it was. And I put another one on Instagram and Litzy and Twitter the other day. Find somebody who knows how to talk about poetry who has reviewed this, because I am not doing it justice and I am just not qualified to talk about poetry, but it was absolutely incredible. And yesterday I started and finished my first foray into my W.E.B. Welsh Readathon TBR, and that was this little pamphlet, Dr. William Price by Dean Powell. And I gave it 3 stars because the Wikipedia page on him is actually more informative than this. I appreciated the many gorgeous glossy pictures in it. Beyond that, I kept checking for more information in the Wikipedia page because this little write-up, It's in both Welsh and English. Focused on the eccentricities and didn't really contextualize anything else, so I didn't really learn very much, other than a few key details about his family and his proclivities to free love and nudism and so on. But anything that was kind of controversial or dramatic about his life was accentuated without any context. So it kind of turned me off Dr. William Price. He seemed like an old coot to me, but I think with the context put back in, there was more to his life than that. Dean Powell has written a full-length biography, and I wasn't put off enough that I don't want to read it, but I actually got more out of the Wikipedia page. The pictures are fantastic. I'm going to talk about Invisible Cities and readathons in a minute, but for Invisible Cities for Guyana, I read Frangipani House by Beryl Gilroy, and I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought the ending was really bad, but was quite good up until then, and I would like to read more by her because there's some beautiful turns of phrase. It was about an old lady, she's not that old, I think she's only 69, black Guyanese lady her family all live abroad in America, and they pay to have her put into a retirement home, and the matron of that retirement home is evil, and there's a lot of elder abuse going on. The protagonist, those are called Big Mama or something, her faculties start to really dwindle down because of where she is and her unhappiness with being there, and there's no stimulation. A lot of her experiences narrated in a kind of a patois that was really quite beautiful to read, about memories of her life, and her life story was fascinating, and it all leads to this climax, part of which was really enjoyable, but some other parts of it were over the top, so I didn't like the ending. Took a star off for that, but there was one quote that I wanted to put up, but I couldn't find a good picture to go with it, so I didn't. So I'll just share it with you, give you a sense of the writing. A conversation between 2 black Guyanese men. One says to the other, "Where would we be without our grandmothers when work takes our mothers from us? They like the backbone in the fish and the thickening in the soup." I love that. I read this on Internet Archive, archive.org, for free, and that's probably the only way you can get it, unless, it's not print as far as I know. I would be very interested in trying something else by Beryl Gilroy, who I believe is... What a lovely woman. Here's a pure picture. She died in 2001, age 76. She died in the UK. She was born in what was then called British Guyana in 1924. She was a teacher, novelist, ethno-psychotherapist. Now, I want to know some more about that. And poet. Described, according to Wikipedia, or according to something quoted in Wikipedia, as one of Britain's most significant post-war Caribbean migrants. Part of the Windrush generation, and one of her children is Professor Paul Gilroy, an English sociologist and culture studies scholar. I'm glad I read it. Didn't care for the ending. I would still recommend it to you. I'm saving the best to last because last night I finished reading to Kendra Winchester and also to Lindy on Voxer Carter Sickels' first novel, The Evening Hour. Can't remember when it was published. I don't think it matters for this review. I loved it. It was a 5-star read. For the first half, I was like, no, this is a solid 4-star read. But by the end, no. The emotional power that's in The Prettiest Star is also there in his debut, The Evening Hour. There were some chapters near the end that were hard to read because the audio narrator was getting all verklempt. It's set in a Appalachian town, I believe, West Virginia, and there is a evil mine that is trying to buy out all the farmers around and all the people living in the countrysides so that they can use their land to keep mining. And there's an environmental protest movement. There's a lot of fundamentalist Christianity. The protagonist is Cole. He's about maybe mid to late 20s, and he is working as a nurse's aide at the local nursing home, and he is also dealing drugs on the side in order to financially support, for many reasons which are not good, but one of the reasons is that his elderly grandparents would not be able to make ends meet without the money that he's giving them. They don't ask him questions about where the money's coming from, but he's buying prescription medication like OxyContin and stuff like that from elderly people because they need the money more than they need the pills. And then he's dealing it to people that are addicts. And he's also doing other things that are really quite morally reprehensible. Yet there is a depth to his characterization where you're rooting for him. And I loved that because if those nuances hadn't been there, I don't like reading about people that are doing shady stuff. It's just not my wheelhouse. But this was such a Sean book because there was a compassion for him and a complexity to his character that just carried me through the novel. And then all this social political stuff with the mine, and there's a lot about sexuality in there that was really quite powerful. Carter Sickels is a trans man. Although there's no overtly trans themes, there are themes of sexuality that are explored with I thought, quite lovely nuance. I loved it with all my heart. Kendra tells me that it's been made into a movie which was released just before COVID came. I can't get access to it from Tokyo, but it'll be something that I'll look for once I'm in Canada because I would love to see it. But the novel was powerful. 5 stars. I recommend it with all my heart. And it was so great to read it to Kendra and Lindy, who both loved it too, I think. I'm not telling tales out of school. So now I'm eagerly, I've read everything Carter Sickels has published, so I'm eagerly anticipating whatever he might come out with next. The other one I have to talk about is the one that I've started. I've only so far started one for the Irish Readathon. I wanted to get started on it because it's several hundred pages. It's the history of modern Ireland, a real personal history. We don't know ourselves, well, it's there in the subtitle. We Don't Know Ourselves, A Personal History of Modern Ireland by Fintan O'Toole. When I took Ronan Hession's recommendation, I didn't check. I got the ebook and I didn't check that it's the hardcover edition is 624 pages. So I better get started on that one. So I have started it. Barely. I've read the foreword and maybe the first chapter. I love it. It's written in a real personal style. I've never read anything by Fintan O'Toole. What else has he written? He's a columnist and drama critic for the Irish Times. Also literary critic, historical writer of history, I guess, political commentator with generally left-wing views. Anyway, really beautifully written, just based on how little I've read. The historical and social context that is provided here in a really entertaining writing style is going to do exactly what I wanted it to do, is to deepen my appreciation of modern Irish literature. So that's going well. This is my plan going forward. My reading time has decreased by about 80%. So I have to make some decisions. So the first decision I've made is I will no longer be participating in Invisible Cities. I just don't have the time to keep up with it. Absolutely not. I may dip into it now and then, but I'm not going to try to keep up with it. I just can't. I don't have the time. Who knows, when I get back to Saskatoon, I might do a remedial just catch-up thing, and that would be fun, but yeah, I can't do that. I can't do any more readathons until I'm in Canada. So Aussie April, I'm sorry, I can't participate. Springathon, all that stuff, just, unless it's by accident or unless somehow I get ahead of myself and have more time later before I move. But no, I think I'm going to be it will be all-consuming getting ready for this move. So I'm now reading maybe an hour or 90 minutes a day instead of, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day. So that means I'm not going to be reading very much. So I am committed to, I'm going to keep going with the 15 books. It will soon be back up to 15. I'm going to keep going with the 15 books I'm reading. I am going to read as many of the books on the Irish and Welsh readathon as I can, and I think I'll be able to get to all of them because I had my TBRs for both of those were small, but it's highly likely that I will still be reading Irish and W.E.B books at the end of May when I move. And even some of the books that I'm currently reading, well, the 2 tomes, Kin by Jurgovich and A Suitable Boy, I will definitely be reading those by the time I move. I'm still reading them, but like once a week. But even smaller books that I'm reading and enjoying, I'm going to start 3 more books that I'm going to show you, and that might be all I get done, if that, by May 28th when I get on the plane to move to Canada. But I am going to start 3 more, and let me tell you about those. I wanted to read that short little pamphlet on Dr. Price because I knew that would be easy to finish and get my feet wet for Delhi-thon, and now I'm going to start the Margiad Evans novel, Creed. It's also pretty short. It's under 200 pages. Originally published in 1936, and this edition came out from Welsh Women's Classics by Honorée. I hope it's good. I loved the first one of hers I read, hated this other one of hers I read. This is going to be the tiebreaker. And I want to get started on this because I'll probably be reading this until the end of 2022, if not beyond. This is the collected stories of Elizabeth Bowen. 79 stories. So if one a week, it'll definitely take me into next year. 2 a week. I don't know how many weeks are left in this year, but to repeat myself from my TBR, she's a dense writer. I love her writing, and I've only read 1 or 2 of her short stories. So I'm going to get started on this one this week and cannot wait. 79 stories and 850 pages. Very small, tight, small margins. And finally, I loved reading to Kendra and Lindy so much. By the way, interrupt myself to say that Lindy and I did film our Zoom chat about that reading project over the Christmas holidays. When she was unable to read because of concussion, we had an absolutely incredible chat about that. A couple weeks ago. It'll take me 2 to 3 to 4 weeks before I edit it. I'm really dying to get it up on my channel because it was just a fantastic conversation. Now, to go back, I loved reading this novel, the Carter Sickels novel, to Kendra and Lindy so much that I've offered to do another one. I gave Kendra a photo of a bunch of books I had, any of which I'd be interested in reading. And she chose the latest novel by Alina Bronsky to be translated into English, My Grandmother's Braid, translated from the German by Tim Moore. Alina Bronsky is a Russian-German writer, writes in German, born in Russia. This just came out in English last year by Europa. 160 pages. Oh, and very short chapters. I've been wanting to read it ever since it came out last year, and thanks to Kendra choosing it, I will be starting this week. So that is what's going on. Happy reading!